I think every time there is a Spider-Man event, be it a new movie or a new cartoon show, with the new wave of merchandise, always comes that one stupid set that comes with a car. And every grown adult thinks the same thing. Unlike Batman, Spider-Man has superpowers that allow him to traverse the sky at incredibly high speeds. Why would he need a car? Well, what if I told you that in the 1970s, the Spider-Mobile was actually a canon fixture of this character? I think it's always safe to assume that any car attached to Spider-Man is always going to exist for the sole purpose of selling toys, and this was absolutely true in the 1970s when the Spider-Mobile first arrived on the scene. Stan Lee was approached by major toy manufacturers wanting to make a line of superhero cars, asking Stan to give cars to his most popular superheroes, and naturally Spider-Man was among the bunch. He tasked Jerry Conway with designing a new car for Spider-Man, and thus the Spider-Mobile was born. In-universe, the Spider-Mobile is, like in the real world, a corporate invention. Spider-Man would be approached by a company called Corona Motors, who would want to sponsor him with their pollution-free engine. Now, I'm guessing that Corona Motors had the worst marketing agency in New York City, because again, Spider-Man is a character that traverses through web-swinging and acrobatics, and he's kinda seen as a menace in the city. This is marketing 101, people. Don't sponsor controversial figures that don't need cars for cars. Now, this story did end up being surprisingly meta, with Spider-Man initially rejecting the idea. I mean, he's thinking what we're all thinking. He doesn't need a fucking car. But we all know that Spider-Man's main weakness is a weakness we all share, and that is financial difficulties. Unlike Bruce Wayne, Spider-Man is not a billionaire, so he needs to take the paychecks where he can get them, and he does reluctantly accept the sponsorship from Corona Motors. Obviously, they only sponsor him with the engine, so he teams up with Johnny Storm to design the Spider-Mobile. A ridiculous dune buggy looking thing in red and blue with webs all over it and little spidey heads on the wheels. The Spider-Mobile was suitably ridiculous for this very meta story that kind of parodies corporate sponsorship. But the more the saga of the Spider-Mobile goes on, the funnier it gets, as it turns out that this car has a set of abilities of its own. It not only can drive Spider-Man around at relatively high speeds, it can also climb walls and shoot webs just like Spider-Man himself. I'm not 100% sure how. I'm guessing that has something to do with how Peter Parker and Johnny Storm set it up. It also comes with Spider-Man's Spider Signal Spotlight. God, that's a lot of alliteration right there. And if you're a big fan of gas pellets, it fires those as well. Not a very typically Spidey ability, but hey, it's the Spider-Mobile. It doesn't need to make any sense. The Spider-Mobile would also include web fluid airbags and ejection seats. Because, I mean, of course, it wouldn't be a fictional vehicle without an ejection seat. Another fun thing, though, is that Peter Parker, being the lifelong New Yorker that he is, a guy that uses the subway and the bus, he never learned how to drive. So we do get some fun moments of the Human Torch teaching Peter how to drive this thing. Oh, did I mention that the Spider-Mobile actually does have a cloaking device as well? So like Spider-Man, it can disguise itself as a Peter Parker-y kind of car. Of course, unlucky as ever, Spidey, while on the go, accidentally crashes the Spider-Mobile into the Hudson River, sinking it to the very bottom. And thus the Spider-Mobile met a watery grave, and it looked like the saga of the Spider-Mobile had finally ended. Now, admittedly, that's a pretty funny story right there. I think that is one way of pulling off a corporate sponsorship for sure. Now, of course, being a corporate sponsorship, though, Corona Motors were not happy about the fact that he'd sunk the Spider-Mobile, so Spider-Man goes to try and retrieve it only to find it missing. But this wasn't the last Peter would see of the Spider-Mobile, as it made a startling return. But this is where the story gets really fucking stupid. The Spider-Mobile had been repaired by two mechanics and made sentient with a desire to kill Spider-Man, as the Spider-Mobile now emits a gas that can rob Peter of his abilities. So now we have the battle of a lifetime, Spider-Man versus a Spider-Man themed Herbie car. I think as a reader, I would be more insulted by this were it not so hilarious. It turns out that the Tinkerer was behind all this, having recovered the Spider-Mobile from the bottom of the Hudson River, and use it as a weapon to destroy Spider-Man once and for all. So in true Spidey fashion, Spidey beats up his own car and returns it to Corona Motors. It's very damaged, but it's better than nothing. and thus the saga of the Spider-Mobile was finally over. Or was it? No, we hadn't seen the last of trusty old Spider-Mobile. It returned again in the Amazing Spider-Man 600 on display at the Smithsonian National Design Museum. And the car continued to make cameo appearances after that, as one of the Spider-Man universes contained a sentient Spider-Mobile. I wonder if he knows Lightning McQueen. And it talks as well! And then of course we have the all-new, all-different Spider-Man run, where Dan Slott reimagined Spider-Man as more of a billionaire playboy with his own company, taking place after the Superior Spider-Man after Doc Ock made Parker Industries, while living inside Peter Parker's body. One of the revolutionary inventions that Parker Industries would bring us was the new Spider-Mobile, much more powerful, much more grunt, and a bit more chic as well. Looks kinda like something out of Rocket League. Spider-Man would use this car on a number of different adventures around the world. Now, I must admit, I think this is a really good example of how good writing and witty comedy can save an otherwise very cynical idea. Anybody with even a single brain cell can tell you that Spider-Man does not need a car. But using this as an opportunity to parody cynical corporate sponsorship found a way to weave this ridiculous and contrived idea into an organic part of the Spider-Man story that feels true to the nature of the character, and thus the Spider-Mobile has gone on to become a beloved cult classic. The question is, do you think we will continue to see the Spider-Mobile brought back in other projects? Maybe in the Into the Spider-Verse sequel, could we perhaps see the sentient version of this? Perhaps MCU Spidey will get a Spider-Mobile somewhere down the line. I wouldn't say it's outside of the realm of possibility, as MCU Spidey does love all things technological, and to some degree he's had a sponsorship before with Tony Stark. It wasn't a financial one, but he still got given cool stuff. Maybe he has Happy Hogan help him out, and Happy Hogan, being the bright spark that he is, comes up with the Spider-Mobile. Of course, we can expect to see the Fantastic Four join the MCU soon, so if Spidey's still sticking around in the MCU, maybe we will get to see that Spidey-Human Torch relationship flourish, which will eventually lead us to the Spider-Mobile. Or maybe one of the Spider-Man PS4 sequels will feature the Spider-Mobile, and it transforms into a tank to destroy drones. Heh, get it? Either way, as ridiculous as this thing is, I can't help but have a soft spot for it. On display at the Smithsonian Well, now I hand it over to you, fellow home dogs. What do you guys think? And if you did enjoy this video, might I ask you a favor? Please hit subscribe and that notification bell as your way of telling YouTube keep it coming. Likes are also highly appreciated. Now, I'm always trying to make my content better and more consistent, but this does come at a financial cost, and ad revenue isn't always going to cover putting a roof over my head and covering the subscription fees for the software I use to make these videos. So if you really enjoy this content and you feel like lending me a hand by any chance, I would be so grateful if you would consider joining my Patreon, which will also give you access to the Channel Pup official Discord server. I also have a written blog called Dr. Blogtopus over on channelpup.net. That is where I put my more critical and analytical stuff. And in the description below are links to different social media platforms where you're more than welcome to come and interact with me. So that's it for today, fellow home dogs. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on another video.